actually been on
Welcome to the
vacation
August
a lot,
27th meeting of the Danvers
See you
Planning
walking
Board.
every morning.
We're going to start off today's meeting with other matters. We have Whipple Hill Phase 1 and Whipple Hill Phase 2, Sandpiper Circle and Carroll Way in front of us. We have a representative.
I gotta recuse myself for a minute.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
John Thompson, Nancy McCann is not available tonight, I guess. So
Apparently
not to-
she's out of the country.
I'll try not to screw this up. We reduced the bond down to, I believe, the number the engineering is looking for is 11,270 on Carroll Way. Of that, 3,200 is bounds and Mylars that need to be completed, and $8,070 is contingencies. I had a question. The last line item was $5,000 for engineering. Can anyone tell me what that's for?
Was gonna bring in the staff anyways to begin with, because I don't believe we got anything on this besides that it was coming in. I didn't see anything.
I stuck it in there, but it was
I might have
not
missed
that
it.
long ago. No,
14 minutes ago.
14 minutes?
Yep.
Bill, why don't you,
It was not you, Bill.
I was in the process of going to get the information.
I got it.
Are you referring to the 5,700 for the as-built, or?
No, the 5,700 is the subtotal of the first three items.
Oh, at the very bottom, the
the very bottom,
5,000 even?
$5,000.
It's 10% contingency for engineering. They always hold back at least that much just for contingency.
It just, if I could be so, offer my 2 cents, there's a contingency on item number, there's a 10% contingency already right above that, and then to have another contingency upon contingency just seems a little redundant to me, considering all the work is done except for the stone bounds and the Mylar.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
offer that for your consideration.
for the board's consideration.
Doesn't seem like there's any more engineering other than what's already been accounted for in the items above.
It doesn't look like it was in there twice. Was it done twice, or?
No. I'm not sure. I mean, this is the same sheet every time, so I'm not sure.
So it's about 80%, if I can, about 80% of it is contingencies upon contingencies upon contingencies.
All right, then I'll throw it out to the board, unless staff has anything else to talk about.
The only thing I was going to say was essentially what the ask is, and what we were going to do is relinquish the agreements for Phase 1 and Phase 2, Sandpiper Way and Sandpiper Circle and Carroll Way, and establish a new performance guarantee for both phases, all as one, with the remainder of this project rolled into the remainder for Sandpiper. So it would just be one tri-party going forward, but that was the scheme, but
Okay.
feel free to discuss.
I agree with that scheme, by the way. I've suggested that to Nancy.
I hope so,
To
that's what you
simplify
applied
it.
for.
Jeez, man.
So I'm going to bring this out to the board. The question from the applicant is to defer the contingency total of $5,000, bringing it down from $11,270 to $6,270.
So you're talking about the 10% contingency?
Yes.
Okay.
And you still, if I can offer you, also still have a contingency on the second phase where they're gonna be combined, so it's, you know, I mean, the other, I didn't address the first road,
Didn't see
Sandpiper
the
Road at all.
total.
Okay. Oh, and then there's the second one for the
Yeah.
engineering. I see what
Yeah.
he's talking about now.
I
So
guess-
it's going, but it's still going from this to 6,000, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
if we take out the 5.
Okay.
If you take out the 5, yes.
Yeah, so the applicant's bringing up the cost in the previous column where the contingency subtotal is of 29,000 was applied before,
thank you.
and then 5,000 on top of that.
Oh, I see.
And it looks like it's being reduced on the remaining cost over to 570 and then 5,000.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. Is that what we're talking about, those numbers? Okay.
Yeah, you can leave it on the Sandpiper portion, but it seems redundant to me to have these extra $5,000 repeated when they're already covered in the line items above. In item number, the 570 above the 5,000
Right.
on the Carroll Way. There is
Peg,
already,
any comments on that?
I guess I'm going to defer to staff. You know, it sounds like it is duplicative, but, you know, we've always relied on engineering to put this together and give us the bottom line figure of what they feel and what they need for contingency. So it appears to be duplicative, but I think I'll defer to the staff.
Yeah, again, I don't really have any further insight on why they are holding back an additional 5 over the contingency.
So engineering did it separate on
Yeah.
top of what,
outside of all of that.
Yeah.
outside of what DPW is doing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll throw it to this side. John, any comments on?
I mean, I'm comfortable reducing that $5,000. I mean, I don't think we need contingency on contingency, if that's what's going on, so I support a lower amount.
Charles?
I agree.
Nathaniel?
I agree with John as well.
Okay. Looks like the board's going forward with, Peg, do you have any issues with it? I don't
Nope.
have a major issue with the 5,000 myself.
I don't have an issue with it, no.
Okay, now that I'm seeing it written out the way it's, they're talking about, so. So we need to amend
Yep,
just the numbers.
just the number.
And we're doing,
Establish the new one first, and then we'll relinquish the other two,
we run this one through and then.
Yeah.
Okay.
and then do the others.
Here you go. Write that one first.
This is to certify at a meeting of the Danvers Planning Board held on August 27th, 2019. By a motion duly made and seconded, it was voted. We, the Danvers Planning Board, have been requested by Whipple Hill LLC, hereinafter called the developer, to accept a performance guarantee in the form of a tripartite agreement by and among the developer, Reading Cooperative Bank, a banking corporation, have an unusual place of business as 180 Haven Street, Reading, Massachusetts, and the Planning Board of the Town of Danvers in the amount of $154,488.25. Do hereby vote to accept the tripartite. Is this what we're voting on?
Amended to
Yeah.
149.
That was the amendment, that's taking the 5,000 off.
That's what, okay.
Yeah.
The developer agrees to complete the work no later than July 23rd, 2020, unless said date shall be extended by a written amendment to the tripartite agreement herewith accepted.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? So we need to release the other guaranteed performances. We have a
So
couple of
I just want to make sure
certificates
that I read that into the record correctly. It should be $149,488.25. I think I read the words, the larger amount, so I just want to make sure that
Okay.
the record's got that correctly.
for that. Okay.
This is to certify that a meeting of the Danvers Planning Board held on August 27, 2019, by a motion duly made and seconded, it was voted, we, the Danvers Planning Board, have been requested by Whipple Hill LLC to release the performance guarantee in the form of a tripartite agreement dated January 17, 2017, by and among Whipple Hill LLC, Reading Cooperative Bank, and the Planning Board of the Town of Danvers, in the original amount of $565,000. Do hereby vote to release the remaining amount of $138,447 held as surety under this agreement.
I have a motion made, do I have a second?
So, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we have one last release.
This is to certify that a meeting of the Danvers Planning Board held on August 27, 2019, by a motion duly made and second, it was voted, we, the Danvers Planning Board, have been requested by Whipple Hill LLC to release the performance guarantee in the form of a tripartite agreement dated January 17, 2017, by and among Whipple Hill LLC, Reading Cooperative Bank, the Planning Board of the Town of Danvers, in the original amount of $565,000. Do hereby vote to release the remaining amount of $99,153.64 held as surety under this agreement.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good luck.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Next, we have continued public hearings. We have 17 Cherry Hill Drive. Please. Right over there.
Good evening, Mike Hanson with the HL Turner Group, engineer for the project for the
Oh,
Millwood
we need to get Jim.
region.
Just give us 1 second. We need to.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I could have gotten him, I didn't even realize.
We left Jim out there.
Forgot all about it.
Sorry, Jim. You're always so quiet. We forgot. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mike Hanson with the HL Turner Group, engineer for the project for Millwood. Again, this is the project where we're expanding the parking in the front of the building on Cherry Hill. Last time we were here, we had just received the engineering comments and we didn't have enough time to get them all squared away before we had met with the planning board, but decided it would be beneficial for us to come forward and see if there are any additional comments. Since then, we've gotten everything to the engineering department. Everything seems to be squared away with them. We did get 2 minor comments, which we already sent back to them. It was just changing of details, and the engineering department seemed okay with everything that we are proposing at this time.
I'm going to open up to staff first. Any comments from engineering or staff that you want to talk about?
No, the applicant is correct. All matters have been satisfied at the staff level.
I'll open up to the board. Jim, anything specific about this you wanted to ask?
No, I'm all set.
Peg?
Nope.
John?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Charles?
None.
Nathaniel?
Oh, thank you.
I have nothing. I'm glad you guys were able to hammer out. It was relatively minor what I remember seeing, but I'm glad that you guys were able to take care of that with it. This is a public hearing. It is a public hearing, so this is open to the public. Does anyone have any questions about Cherry Hill? Questions, comments from the public? Nope. Okay. Then I'm asking for the board to close the public hearing.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing for 17 Cherry Hill Drive.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Here you go, Jim, you get to read that.
This is to certify that a meeting of the Danvers Planning Board held on July 23rd, no, we'll call it August 27th, 2019, by a motion duly made and seconded, it was voted. We, the Danvers Planning Board, have been requested under Section 4 of the zoning bylaw to approve a major modification to an approved site plan for the property located at 17 Cherry Hill Drive, Assessors Map 29, Lot 1. Do hereby vote to approve the application submitted by the H.L. Turner Group, Inc. to modify the previously approved site plan to allow 25 additional new parking spaces as shown on the following plans. As described, containing 13 sheets, revised through August 2nd, 2019. Stamped by Harold Turner Jr., registered professional engineer, number 30941. Landscape plans for the new parking lot, 17 Cherry Hill Drive, Danvers, Mass., prepared by Shadley Associates, Lexington, Mass., stamped by Pamela Shadley, registered landscape architect, number 994, consisting of 2 sheets, dated 6/11/18, revised through 7/6/18, and plans new parking lot, 17 Cherry Hill Drive, prepared by H.L. Turner Group, Inc., consisting of 2 sheets, dated 6/11/18, revised through 7/6/18, stamped by Harold Turner, registered professional engineer, number 30941. This approval is subject to the following condition. 1, the attached list of general conditions approved by the Planning Board on January 27, 2004, amended through February 27, 2018, which are incorporated in the certificate of action by reference. Any approval of the site plan shall last within 2 years from the grant thereof, if construction has not begun by such a date, except for good cause.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're moving on to public hearings. We have 50 Spring Street in front of us. I'm going to open up the public notice. Notice hereby given that the Danvers Planning Board will hold a public hearing in the Toomey Room, Danvers Town Hall, 1 Sylvan Street, on Tuesday, August 27, 2019, at 7 p.m., relative to a request for a major modification to an approved site plan submitted by St. John's Preparatory School on property at 50 Spring Street, map 19, lot 17. Pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw, said property is located in the Residential 3 zoning district. The applicant proposes to add a maintenance shed and a section of the bleachers to the Linus Athletic Field. Copies of the application and plans are on file and available for public review in the Land Use and Community Services Department, Danvers Town Hall. Please.
Hi, I am Katie Cruz from Hancock Associates. I'm here with Steve Cunningham from St. John's Prep. We're here to present the major modification application for the proposed shed and bleachers. They will be located adjacent to the Brother Linus Athletic Field, which is a synthetic turf athletic field. The shed will be on the east side, on the Summer Street side of the field, and the bleachers will be on the southern side next to the existing parking area. This is a little bit more detail. The purpose of the shed is to be a maintenance shed with easy access to the field so that they can maintain it. And the bleachers are to provide seating for people coming to watch athletic events there. Currently, people bring chairs or sit on the ground. Both of them will be installed on concrete pads. The shed will be on a pad that's about 18 by 35, and the bleachers will be on a pad that's 13 by 83 feet. We received some comments from the engineering department, which we responded to last week, and I've been told that our answers were okay, and they don't have any future comments. So that's pretty much it.
I'll turn it over to staff for any further comments.
Sure, just to clarify, Katie's correct, engineering was satisfied with this. Their main concern was stormwater, but I think we got everything squared away. Just so the board knows, the applicant has asked for a few waivers from submission requirements, and as this is a protected use under the Dover Amendment, we don't see that as unreasonable.
Can you just briefly go over those waivers?
It's-
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay, it's in the application. Let me see. It was really just for submission. Certain plan sets. 1 second. The applicant requests waivers of the site plan sheet set requirements, as those requirements are onerous for this 111-acre campus. They did not specify them in detail, as bulleted.
Okay. I'll throw it out to the board. Nathaniel, any particular questions you want to ask?
No, I've looked at the diagram and the photograph of, that was provided in the package that we were emailed, and having lived in the St. John's Prep area for my entire life, I just say that they do a nice job, I think, on their campus and making it look nice for everyone, and I don't have any questions at all.
Charles?
No, I'm fairly well satisfied.
John?
Just, can you show me where the stands are gonna be located? Wasn't there in the history stands there a long time ago? Wooden stands, or am I remembering things?
There are currently some stands behind home plate. On
Sorry.
Can we
Can you
get
use the
your name?
Microphone.
Okay, so this is for the baseball field, is that what that's for? When you said on Summer Street, I just didn't understand, I thought it was further up.
So the shed is kind of off of Summer Street. The bleachers will be, this is their existing parking area down here. The bleachers will be on this side of the field.
But it's the new field, right? Is that where the
It's
bleachers?
the existing field that was resurfaced this year.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was bleachers at one point, right? Or no?
At one point, we had bleachers on the field,
Okay.
and we do have some further along down by the west side of the field. And we're adding these kind of to the second striped field.
Okay. That's all, I was just more curious of where they were gonna be placed.
Jim, any questions?
Nope. I'm
Okay.
fine.
Just about, the waiver of the plan set. I mean, we've had so many changes come in for St. John's Prep over time. It's been dribs and drabs and dribs and drabs. You asked to not do a whole set of plans, so are you doing plans? How was that done with the Registry of Deeds? Maybe you can ask that, Jim. Do they just slide a set of plans in? Do we have a whole set of completed plans of all the changes that St. John's has made over the last, what have they been doing this? Is this their 8 or 10-year plan?
Well, I'm sure they would have to give an as-built to the town once it's completed.
They do give an as-built. I don't believe these go to the registry.
They wouldn't
They don't
be-
go to the
wouldn't-
registry?
they-
Okay, they're not
I mean, these
registered.
are minor structures, I don't,
Okay.
You
But
don't-
they have done
you're not
major work
conveying
over the
property.
years. We've had a lot of things going on, and is there one set of plans somewhere that shows everything that's been happening?
well, like when they completed the wellness center, I'm sure they would have to give as-built plans in order to get an occupancy. I'm sure the applicant can address those comments, questions.
Okay.
Yes, it's sort of over the last 6 years that we've done some major projects, and, with the addition of the middle school and the addition of the wellness center, and, we went through all procedures and submitted all as-built drawings for those major projects.
Okay, so there's a set of as-bills that shows everything that's gone on for,
we would have as-built for each individual filing. They're not compiled into like a master set of modifications over the years. So it starts with the original site plan. If there
Right.
never were one, the one that's filed originally is the site plan. And every
Mhm.
modification subsequent, we get as-built at the end of construction for each modification. Those don't get rolled into a brand-new site plan.
They don't get rolled into a brand-new site plan. So
Right.
if they were to come back in, we don't see all the changes that have been made.
Not compiled, not cumulative.
But if you put buildings on, you could put 100 buildings on there, it's not gonna, unless you put easements or something that's gonna require recording at the registry of deeds, you're not gonna,
We could have any-
you're not required to
Okay, okay, you
record
don't have
that.
to record
I
anything.
mean, you could,
It's just the
put as
town
many
that holds
buildings as
on
you
to all
want.
of that, but someone,
the
if
town
someone,
has to show that it meets the requirements of the building, building department. and
so
then-
someone could go into the building department and see everything that's happened the
And
past
our
six
deci- and the decisions
Oh.
of the board, too.
and the decisions of the board.
All the
Okay.
building permits are of record.
All right,
Yeah.
okay, all right, it's just, I just get concerned when we work on this little piece and that little piece, and we have talked about having complete set of plans and things like that over the years. So,
Yeah.
that there is one source of reference.
I'm sure they have it. You would have a master file of what you've done in the last 10 years in front of the board, I would think.
We don't have a compiled master plan. We have, certainly has built of all the projects.
Okay. All right, doesn't really have anything to do with this. I was just curious, as I said, because this has been an ongoing thing over and over and over again.
Well, I would think Hancock Survey could prepare it if you needed it.
Yeah.
I mean, they could,
Yeah, unless they were doing a whole major overhaul.
yeah, but I mean, they've been the surveyor of record for the last,
Right.
as long as I've been on the board, 25 or 30 years.
Well, the
How
schools,
long?
there's been renovations, Peg, going on for 25 years.
Yeah, I know
Right,
for as
and
long, I mean, and that's what I mean, when you said 6 years, I was like, no, excuse me.
Those are the most recent big changes, but yeah.
Yeah, but there's been,
23
St.
years.
John's has been here for, not 30, going on for 30 years, Jim, but for a while.
Over 100.
This is a
Yeah.
public hearing, so I'm going to open it up to the public at this point in time. Does anyone have any comments, questions regarding 50 Spring Street and the major modification? Please, Mr. Bradstreet.
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I echo the questions that the young lady has asked. It'd be nice if there were a composite to show it's, as opposed to, we did this then, we're gonna do this now, this is the future, to see what the completed picture would be, so we would be able to see what the completed picture is gonna be, not be fed dribs and drabs.
You
Just-
can, on a
just
site
so-
like this, it would be really small on the amount, given the amount of land. Like, it would be really tiny, what you'd have written down on
I suppose, right, if you had a
it.
plan.
It's just given how big the plan, big
Yeah,
big
yeah,
the
it'd
site
be
is.
difficult.
I mean, we've gotten, I don't have a problem with what we're all discussing. This seems like it's more procedural than
It is.
specific to this site. We've had other plans in front of us that were larger, like some of the mall areas, where we'll get, the whole site's under review, but we may not get the whole site thrown in front of us, just because it's something so far away. And if you put the whole site up, that it would reduce the area so small that you'd have trouble seeing it on the plan itself. But that's something we can always bring up for future preference, to have a full set of plans when projects are done, at least.
So I think when you have a modification to a site plan, you really need the site plan, the approved site plan, the whole site plan.
That's something that we can bring forward, but at this point in time, I don't think it's required of the applicant, so.
Can certainly talk about modifications to the bylaw for what's required.
Right,
Yep.
but you're talking about, yeah, we're talking about a change in the bylaw, so.
You're also talking about a 630 square foot shed on a 177 acre property. We're talking about a shed.
I'm not
and some
disputing
stand.
that.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
I'm-
if it
what
was,
I'm
if it was a
asking
building
is-
that required, parking and looking at, we're worried about water and we're worried about, traffic and things like that. This is a de minimis in the big scheme of things. It's a lot of work for a shed that they're required to do. And I think it's been, it's been vetted by the town and by staff.
I hear what you're saying.
Mhm.
It's just that I, as
He
the
agrees with
lady asked for, I'd like to be able to see a drawing that this is the piece of property, these are the buildings, either there now or to be built in the future, so I'd be able to look at, or anybody would be able to look at a picture. This is what we're gonna look like 5 years, 10 years, whatever, this is, or even, this is what it started at, one building, and now it's 15 buildings, we have this. Granted, they've been added piece by piece over a period of time.
Right.
But again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an engineer. I'd like to be able to look at something so like in my mind, I can picture what in the end it's going to look like. I'm just throwing it out there, whether we have to do it or not. I personally would like to be able to, if it came up, look at something so I could see what has been done over the years. Thank you.
And to clarify, my objection isn't to a shed and a set of stands, it's to what we have for a resource showing what's happened
Right.
out there. And if it's all in one place and in something that someone can actually go see. So I'm not objecting to a shed or stands, but, we have had other things. We have a middle school, we have the wellness center, we've had changes in parking, we've had a lot that's gone on up there. So that was only why, when you mentioned waiving a set of plans, that triggered in my mind, where are all those plans? What do they show? So that was my
Well, they don't
question.
disappear, they're all there still.
Yeah, I know. I know they're in the town.
Well, I know at one point we talked about making items like this subject to a planning staff administrative review, where we didn't, back in the day, we talked about not having an applicant go through the process for something as
Right.
tiny as this.
Well, this turned into a major modification because of the structure itself.
18
bigger
by
than-
But if it
35
was a
feet.
minor,
If it was
yeah.
a 10 by 10 shed, we wouldn't be having this
And then it would be
discussion.
it'd be a minor
Right.
modification, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, we did discuss that before.
Right,
Yeah.
and we tried to move some stuff off to staff
Right.
that was de minimis like this, but
Right,
it rose above that level.
right. Anything else from the audience? Any more questions, comments? No. Then I'm looking for, unless there's any other comments from the board, closing of the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll give this one to Charles. He wants to read it.
This is to certify that at a meeting of the Danvers Planning Board held on August 27th, 2019, by a motion duly made and seconded, it was voted, we, the Danvers Planning Board, having been requested under Section 4 of the zoning bylaw to approve a major modification to an approved site plan for the property located at 50 Spring Street, Assessor's Map 19, Lot 17, do hereby vote to approve the application submitted by St. John's Preparatory School to modify the previously approved site plan to add a maintenance shed and a section of the bleachers to the Linus Athletic Field as shown on the following plans. Permit site plan, Brother Linus CFX Athletic Commons, Summer Street, Danvers, Massachusetts 01923 for St. John's Preparatory School. Prepared for St. John's Preparatory School, 72 Spring Street, Danvers, Massachusetts 01923. Prepared by Hancock Associates, 185 Center Street, Danvers, Mass 01923, consisting of 5 sheets. Title sheet, topographic plan of land in Danvers, Mass, locus plan of land in Danvers, Mass, erosion and sedimentation control plan, site plan of land in Danvers, Mass. Sheets 1, 3 through 5 stamped by Catherine A. Cruz, registered professional engineer, number 51384. Sheet 2 stamped by Wayne C. Jalbert, professional land surveyor, number 36118. Plans, approvals by St. John's Prep, Danvers, Mass. P22515. Prepared by Dant Clayton Corporation, 1500 Burnhelm Lane, Louisville, Kentucky 40210. The approval is subject to the following conditions. The attached list of general conditions approved by the Planning Board on January 27, 2004, amended through February 27, 2018, which are incorporated in this certificate of action by reference. Any approval of this site plan shall lapse within 2 years from the grant thereof, if construction has not begun by such date, except for good cause.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good luck. Next, we have continued public hearings for Beaverbrook Woods.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be recusing myself on this matter.
Yes.
And, have a good night. I'm gonna watch the video.
You gonna watch
He's
it?
Send it to me.
Okay.
Can you get out? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. John Colantoni, applicant. Good to see everyone. I just want to start off by saying thank you for all your time. There's been a lot of effort put into this over many, many months. I think our first site view was back in the winter time, January, February. So we appreciate all the time spent with it. We're hoping tonight, when we go through this, that we might be able to get a vote from the board based on conditions. Because I think there'll be a couple things discussed tonight that we'll be able to answer. And obviously, as always, we want to do everything correctly and keep all the departments happy. But this has been a long, ongoing thing, not only for us and the board, but for a lot of neighbors that are involved in the project in the neighborhood. So we're hoping we can move past that. So with not me taking any more time, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Cameron to give the presentation on some of the detailed stuff. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Scott Cameron with the Warren Cameron Group, 66 Elm Street in Danvers, Massachusetts. This is a continuation of the hearing from July. During that time, we had just received comments from a third-party consultant, and we had previously received comments from the town engineer. We did submit a response to all those comments. We have seen a response back from the town engineer, not from Meridian Associates yet, but we'll say nothing, none of the comments resulted in any changes substantially to the plan or the project. Most of it was technical documentation, clarifying notes, providing details here and there to, as one would expect with the review. So just to touch on a few of the adjustments we did make on the waivers, the third-party review asked us to add modify one, which was the Cape Cod berm, which called for a 6-inch height. We're actually requesting a 4-inch height on it. We'd already listed it as requesting a 2-foot width to 12-inch width, so it was just an adjustment to that one. And then they asked us to add a waiver for 2 others for using wood post and beam guardrails, which is what has been done on the other subdivisions, as opposed to a steel beam guardrail that you would see on a highway. The residential neighborhoods are better suited for the wood post and beam, which meet code, but require a waiver from the subdivision regulations. And then we added a waiver to put black vinyl coated fencing instead of green vinyl coated fencing. So technically it's a waiver. We had asked for that on a prior subdivision, I recall once, but it's the color that's in the regulations, so we would like to put in black. We think it looks better and holds up better over time. In the packets, you may have noticed an additional plan. We did add this plan. This was not a comment, but this is something that we added as a sheet 4A. This is a conveyance plan. So what this is intended to do is for an attorney to take at time of closing to make sure the deeds of record are properly conveying the various pieces. And you can see how there's parcels A through R that are associated with this, with the moving parts that are happening. So this is a conveyance plan. That's the purpose of it. So an attorney can reference this parcel D, that area with these bearings and distances go this way. And a summary of that is here to clarify what's happening. And then we took some of that information that was previously on the lotting plan and stripped it off, so this is clear. So this would be the subdivision plan. The conveyance plan gets us to the land area for the subdivision. The subdivision plan is what annotates the new lots. So just clean it up, making it easier to follow. Otherwise, there really weren't any more significant changes to the plans. We did update some of the grading on the lots. We did file, actually, notice of intent applications with the Conservation Commission for the road and 3 of the house lots here, and that's currently before the commission. We're planning to do a site walk with them, David, hopefully Thursday, not in the rain tomorrow
Yes.
night.
Hopefully Thursday.
But we do, we're gonna have a meeting with them right after Labor Day weekend. And so there's some details and updates made on that. And that process also, the notice also clarified the wetland replication piece, which is shown on these plans, but now the detail is provided and done. That doesn't change anything here. This is really a Concom matter on how they're gonna plant it and grade it and treat that afterwards. We brought Heather Montecup tonight from GPI, Raymond Peterson. She was a traffic consultant in case there was any questions from the board. And aside from that, there's a quick summary of the project. The roadway would come in, and this is what we walked back over the winter time. It's the same alignment we saw on the site walk, but between 333 and 327. This is generally following alignment of existing right-of-way that comes out and takes an angle, comes across a piece owned by the town, and the current right-of-way extends out here. This is a right-of-way that was reserved by 305R, this piece here, to pass over all these lots, and that ends here. And so what we're doing is we're effectively using that right-of-way, and then once we get past this piece, turning it. And this creates the frontage for the 8 new house lots. The existing lots on Maple Street all remain, albeit we have reconfigured the lots, so either bringing them into full compliance with the zoning, where now they don't comply dimensionally, or bringing them closer to. So a lot of these lots are very irregular in shape. They're too narrow, they're too long. We've tried to make them more of a regular shape to the extent we can. And the existing configuration of all the lots are shown on the existing conditions plan. I don't think I have much else to present tonight. There wasn't, most of what we've been working on is technical responses.
Okay, I'm gonna bring it out to staff if there's any comments beyond what we have.
I think most of what you have is there. I mean, I guess Scott mentioned the engineering memorandum. It was technical aspects. I guess there was a big one for us, which we discussed, I think, last week with the applicant's engineering team. That engineering wants a geotechnical analysis and structural design of the proposed retaining wall, which we don't have. The other thing was, I think as I mentioned in the memo, at the request of some residents, town council looked into the right-of-way, and currently we don't have any information on the right-of-way shown on the plans that may or may not be existing. So to traverse town property without rights in the way being known, town council gave pause, which I quoted town council's email in the memo, so. Beyond that, there was a few smaller things in the memo, but those are the big ones.
Okay. I'm gonna bring it out to the board. Peg, do you have any questions?
Well, I've read David's memo, and I'm concerned about the right-of-way, but I don't know what you can do about it. You actually can't establish that that was a laid-out street that traversed over the town right-of-way?
It's not that we can't establish that, we haven't been furnished with that information from the applicant.
Okay, so that information may exist, you just don't have it yet.
It could, yeah.
Okay. As far as the traffic with Greenman and Pedersen here, I mean, I don't have a problem with the traffic coming out and the way that the road is coming out at a 90-degree angle. I don't think that the impact on, I mean, we all know that 62 is terrible, but I don't think that the number of houses that are in there are gonna have any sizable impact on 62. I think the impact might be on getting out of the roadway, and that's gonna be the problem of the homeowners. I'm a little concerned about the retaining wall. I'm glad that engineering has asked for more detail about that. So, you know, I don't think I'm at a place for approval tonight. There seems to be still some unanswered questions.
John?
Okay, I know, Francine, you wanted me to look at the video from the last meeting, so I just want the record to show that I did see that YouTube video of the prior meeting. So I got a little history in terms of why the change from cluster to conventional subdivision. I am concerned, though, that this legal issue is coming up now compared to months ago during the cluster conversation, because the issue would have been the same.
Mm-hmm.
So that bothers me, that's a new issue that is coming out tonight. As far as that left-hand turn, I agree with Peg. I'm not concerned. That's really a homeowner's decision. And I am concerned that this is dragging on. So I think we got to make a decision sooner or later. So that's kind of my comments.
Okay. Charles?
Yeah, I kind of echo John. I mean, you know, we've been at this for close to a year now, and I am, kind of feel bad that that's drawn out for so long. But also, as John said, the legal issues coming to light now make me feel conflicted
Yes.
about pushing it through, or you know, voting on it tonight.
Nathaniel?
I also have that same concern, both concerns that were just raised, that this has been dragging on forever, and I feel bad for John and everyone else involved. But if there are concerns about the structure of a retaining wall, that needs to be addressed. And if there are legal concerns regarding town property and rights of way, and the town council is concerned about it, then that needs to be ironed out. But you know, as has been said, we don't want to continually drag this on and on and on, because it gets costly to everybody involved. As we know, this is a business that they're trying to make happen, so that's all I have to say.
Okay. I do have one question to the applicant. Has it been hammered out about the length of the road? And I know that there's a waiver asked for it, which we've granted in the past, but I know that there was some concern about the water and that it needed to be cycled over to one of the other mains on the streets.
Yeah, so the thing I can go back to is the town engineer has reviewed the water system and the dead-end road length and has not expressed any written concerns about either of those aspects of it. From my local experience working in this area, the water pressure on Maple Street is very good.
Okay.
In the square. There's a main line that's relatively new. Within the last 10 years, they upgraded that. So we don't have any concerns about water pressure, water quality, or flow.
Okay. I would like to remind the board that this is going to be going out for the town to take over the road. So if something does happen to this road, the town's responsible for it, as opposed to it being a private way. So that retaining wall, and any water pressure issues that do come up, the town would be responsible down the road whenever it is, but they would have to be required to fix that, as opposed to a tripartite agreement or some of the other systems that we have available for the private owners. Maybe I misread that. Was the water pressure an issue associated with?
Yeah, essentially, engineering hasn't come out now and said that there's a pressure issue. The provisions in the bylaw to ensure that everyone in the entire town has adequate water pressure going forward. So
Right.
at this point, if the main doesn't need to be looped due to pressure, that's fine. I think we were just looking for an easement through from the subdivision road out to Maple.
Okay.
For in the future, if there's 7 more subdivisions down the road, or a whole hospital comes online, or God knows what, we can loop that main if needed.
Because in general, I have no problem with the road. I have no problem granting a waiver for the length of the road. I just want to make sure that the water pressure isn't going to be.
Yeah, and I can speak to that too. The water main follows Route 62, which bends around here. So there would be no benefit to looping it back. You wouldn't, this would not ever be extended this way.
Right.
Usually if you're making a larger, good example is up on Whipple Hill, right? If you recall, that was 5 years ago, so we went through the permitting on that. That one is probably a good 100 feet higher in elevation than this road, and we did have a water pressure. It was right on the line up there, right? So what we did do on that is we looped it back down. I believe it's a road called Larrabee. Don't quote me if that's wrong. We did a cross-country water connection, secured an easement, because that did have a benefit, because it looped the Bayberry neighborhood back down and out to Pine Street. So that did have a beneficial loop. This isn't a loop, this would just be connecting back on itself, and I don't want to put words in the mouth of the town engineer, but that's kind of the scope of the discussion we have. There's really no reason to put that loop in there.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I would like to respond to some of the other concerns expressed by the board members.
Please.
With regards to the retaining wall, it's an interesting, comment from my perspective, because we've just done two other subdivisions recently, one with a 16-foot retaining wall, the other one with an 11-foot retaining wall. This retaining wall is 9 feet tall. Under state building code, this does not require structural design. It requires a building permit only. So when you get over 10 feet, you need to get a structural engineering stamp on it. So this is one of the shortest walls we've done in recent projects. And the reason why we don't have a structural design, one, it's not required, we wouldn't normally do that, but two, the wall manufacturer won't do this until we've signed a contract to purchase the blocks. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing for us. One suggestion I might have, because, again, I stamp the plan here myself, because I don't have any concerns about the construction of this wall because of the work we've done out here and the soil testing that we've done for this wall. And because it's, again, it's not a structural wall. But one thing I might propose to the board is put a condition, and put a condition on the permit that says we get to provide the fully designed wall prior to its construction, or prior to some benchmark. Because, the next step from here is we go out to bid, we hire a site contractor, and then at that point, we've got a contract to purchase these blocks, and they're gonna give us the fully engineered plans. The wall manufacturer did provide this for me. He was there because we do a lot of work with them. So I was able to get this design, and it will be something close to this that they'll probably fine tune, value engineer, and adjust. But, you're looking at what we're probably gonna get back. So it's a fail-safe. It gets it into the building department and the town engineer before it's put in the ground. And I don't think Mr. Colantoni would have an issue with that condition.
No, it's one of the things I was gonna say, a condition like that would be fine. It'd just be nice to, do it afterwards, so we know that we're, moving forward. Obviously, we wanna keep Mr. King happy and give him what he wants, which is gonna be a bigger expense for us to do it that way, even though by state standards, we don't have to, but if that's what the town wants, that's what we'll do. But it would be much better for us as a condition than to have to do it ahead of time before we even know if we have a subdivision.
I don't have too much of an issue with the left-hand turn. I don't think that it should be required personally. Mainly because one, won't be enforced, and two, I don't think people will pay attention to it. There's plenty of other roads that are coming out on 62 that we're not putting those kinds of requirements on. And this could start a trend where we'd start telling everybody on 62 they can only turn right. And I'm not sure that too many people would actually would pay attention to that.
Look at the bollards up by Lowe's.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that, although
I wouldn't
I
have,
understand the traffic issue.
the
I
left
don't think
turn
that
isn't
the number-
important to me either.
Yeah,
And I
I'm-
feel again that the traffic is what it is on 62, and it's the homeowners, how they get in and out.
And I
How
just
they get
think
in and out.
people trying to enforce it, the town trying to enforce it
Yeah,
would be
I agree.
overextending for no reason
I
whatsoever.
agree.
There's either gonna be a break in traffic where people can take a left or they're not.
Yep.
That's what's gonna happen. In terms of the easement, I have one question for staff on this one. Sure. If we proceed forward, and for whatever reason that easement isn't verified prior to building, does the onus fall on the applicant to come back and change things, or does it automatically end it, or would we be, if we approved it and the easement isn't what we think it is, would the building still go forward, or would they have to rearrange it according to where the easement is? Because I'm assuming we're gonna need proof of where that easement is before anything can start.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in short, I would strongly recommend not doing that. There would be no reason for us to dig further to look into that easement if you approve this now.
Okay.
So essentially, the town would be giving away all of its rights in the land that the town owns
Okay.
with them.
I speak on behalf of the applicant, James
Okay.
Cody. That's not a true statement. The easement, if we have the rights, we have the rights. If we do not have the rights, we do not have the rights. Nobody has been asking about our rights in these other properties. And you have a plan with the conveyancing? So we have numerous parcels being transferred in order to create this subdivision. Nobody's looked at those transfers.
You haven't provided them.
It's not required under the statute. It's not the purview of the planning board to determine ownership at the time of application.
Yes, it is.
No, it is not.
But if the town owns that lot of land,
Then we don't build the subdivision.
The town does own the lot. It
They
owns
own the
fee-
lot,
It owns the fee in the lot
subject
and
to
the fee
the,
in the way.
subject to the
But
50-foot
it's,
right of
it
way.
has a stake in the ownership of the fee. The town does.
But they've taken ownership subject to the right of way. They took title through a tax title.
Okay, and you haven't shown us that we don't have those rights.
Mr. Chair, if I may speak to try to clarify.
go ahead.
So, when we were originally asked about some of this easement problem, title problem, or whatever, way above my head, it was talked about at the end of the road. Like, does anyone have rights to make this go farther? That's what we were originally asked about. And no one does. It ends right there. So now, just in the last short time, we've been asked for something further. And it seems like whenever we come almost to end, like we've answered all the questions, something else gets thrown at us sort of last minute. And that's okay. It's not a problem.
This was brought up about a month or so ago.
So, about the end of the road, does anyone have rights to go further? That's how it was posed to us. But it's okay, I understand the question, and if I was
Right.
sitting in your chair, I'd be asking the same question. I wouldn't want to have a legal problem for the town. So we agree with that. All the other property except the town piece, we are gonna own.
Right.
So we could technically put that road any way we want because we're gonna own it with the approval of the board, of course. So the only piece that we're really talking about is the town piece, because the town owns it. So we have to use that easement, that right-of-way, where it was put on that town lot. So the town wants proof that it exists. We don't mind that as a condition, and it's very easily proven. Now, just to give you an idea, we've had 2 licensed surveyors at different times, not together, go out and do this whole thing, and they came to the same conclusion of that right-of-way or easement, again, whatever you want to call it. I'm not an attorney. In addition to that, 3 different attorneys, and I'm not going to speak for any one of them. One of them's in the room. One sits on the board that has to recuse himself every time I'm here. And the other is Nancy McCann, who's on vacation. They've all looked at this project. Some of them out of the 3 deeper into the easement and title things and all that. And we wouldn't have brought this thing this far or spent the amount of money that we've spent if we weren't sure. So with that said, if it's a condition that we have to prove that the easement exists, the right-of-way exists through the town property, we will provide that to keep town council happy, because that only makes sense. I totally respect that. But again, there's no problem with the condition. If all of a sudden we can't prove that, and we can't cross the town property, the project as is history. We'd have to redo it or whatever, and do a major modification or minor, whatever it would be, and come back to the board. So the board ultimately is gonna be in control and have say. So I just wanted to clarify that. I appreciate the time.
Okay.
So Dave, Bill, can I ask
Please.
through you? So I'm confused why town council, with a title research, right, and getting title insurance, we can't get to an answer. Why is he having a hard time?
So I understand the concerns about this project dragging out, and it does seem like it's been a long time, but bear in mind, this is two separate permits. I know it seems like we started in January, but we actually didn't start this process until the last meeting that you missed. So that was the first meeting for this project, technically. Town council hasn't looked at anything at that point because this wasn't at the definitive stage. We've been asking for the information on the wall and the deeds since the special permit phase, and we kept getting told by the applicant's attorney, that'll come at the definitive stage. That's now. I asked about these things last meeting, which was the first meeting, and we haven't received
No,
it.
okay, maybe I didn't
So town
ask the.
council wouldn't have delved into it.
No, but I mean, reading his memo, right, basically say I'm at a roadblock because I can't validate that the easement exists. It doesn't seem, and I do a lot of this stuff in the banking business, that hard to find is an easement recorded or not. And if it's not properly recorded, would an title insurance company bond over that?
I can't speak for title insurance, but it's not really the purview of town council to go out hunting for these things. It's on
Okay,
the applicant
okay.
to provide it to us.
So you guys have you seen in your own title searches where that easement's been recorded?
The easement was recorded in 1950, I believe. 50, 54. It's been in existence ever since.
So why can't we
Again,
find it?
this is not, I don't understand at this stage of the game, we have not been asked to provide title to any other parcel that we're gonna take title
I
to.
get that.
So it's not part of the, that I've ever seen in the planning board process. It's never been part of who owns what, because we're gonna put together parcels, and guess what, if this guy doesn't sell, he defaults,
Can't do
we
the
can't do the
project.
project.
Right.
So it's not up to the board to determine
No, I
whether.
know, but this is the town's piece, so it's, to me, it's all about the ownership of the town's piece and the easement that you guys need to do the job, right? I'm just stunned to hear that this is still,
Right,
But if you took a vote and said, subject to applicant's availability to use the 50-foot right-of-way over town property, there's no harm there. You're protected, we're
well, that's
protected.
not what, unfortunately, that, obviously, the memo hasn't been shared with the applicants. That's not what the town council's telling us.
The first that we're hearing about town council, and correct me, Scott, help me out. First that we're hearing about town council is tonight. I didn't know this was going to town council. That was never shared with us. That was never discussed in the meeting that we had together last week when we were going over the applications.
We discussed it numerous times, John.
No,
At the meeting.
we've never,
Yes, we did.
David, we've never discussed town council.
Okay.
But that's, but it is okay. And the other thing that we can agree to disagree, and this came up by one of your board members earlier in this meeting, is though it's two separate applications, cluster, conventional, understand, that's why it's a little bit longer too, I agree, David. But something like this should have came up when we were here for the cluster,
It did.
if it was an issue for the town.
It did.
Cluster was approved.
Yeah. The use
Because
of the
the
special
subdivision-
permit was approved.
Right.
You still have to come back for a second phase, which is technically the phase you're in now. We'd still be here either way at the end of
So
the day.
did it go to town council for the cluster way back then?
It wouldn't
No,
have. It's
you
a
need to
special permit for the use. There's nothing.
No, I'm talking about on the question that you're asking to go over the town property.
No, we asked you to furnish us with the information, which we would have passed to town council had you given it to us, but we didn't get it.
So if you have the information, why not just present it?
So
and
if
give
all
it?
we're asking
We
we
will, but
present
then-
it to you
situation.
and you agree, everything's great. What if town council says, I don't agree?
Well, right now, he's
Then you don't
saying
have a
he can't
subdivision.
validate anything,
But
so
that-
if you
that
have
doesn't-
something.
That doesn't negate a vote. That's what I'm trying to get at.
All I'm
With a
asking
condition.
for is to supply the remedy if you have it, and you'll get
And we
the
have no
vote.
problem providing that, but I want to make clear to the board, we can agree to disagree, David, that this is the first that we're being asked for the town property piece. That's the first that we're being asked for that, within the last 24 hours, this meeting. So, you know, we come here in good faith, we meet with you in good faith to go over things, to try to make things easier at the meetings. And then we get blindsided, which I really don't think is fair. So with that said, we have no problem providing it. None at all. We'll provide it on the town piece of property. We don't have a problem with, no one else in town for years has had to do a peer review. We paid for a peer review. We agreed to that. Now we're being asked to pay for structural engineering plans that's not even required by state level. And you've done two other big walls in the last 2 or 3 years that didn't require structural engineer plans and that were above state level, that didn't just need a building permit. And now we're being asked to do that, and we're willing to do that. All we're asking is, when I come into a town to do a project, I always look at it this way, especially in Danvers. We're a team to make this project the best it possibly can and the safest that it possibly can and the best for the town. That's what we do. And it's a give and take to make that work. And all I'm asking for is, we're willing to do what the board wants, but please give us the direction that we know that we have a project to spend that additional funds. Because we're spent funds, it's not your problem how much money we have to spend to approve a project, but we've shown in good faith that we're willing to go the extra mile. You people have seen the projects that I've been involved in town. We don't skimp. It's high quality, and we do what we say we're gonna do, and we keep our promises to the board. So that's all we're asking on those two conditions. We have no problem. Have every right to ask for it, we'll provide it.
Thank you. Aaron, did you want to say anything?
I think we did ask for these things at the special permit phase in the process. We were told, David and I brought up significant concerns with the process, and in that we had fundamental questions about the proof plan, you may recall. We had fundamental questions that were raised at that time about the base subdivision and the rights embodied in the property, and we lost that point, and were told we would receive those answers at the definitive stage. This is why we wanted to deal with those problems then. We didn't want this to get to this point, to get to these answers, but that's the process that the applicant has chosen to go down.
Okay. I do remember in the meeting when we were doing the special permit, it was also on the board. I remember Peg bringing up that she was wondering about why we were voting on a special permit without a specific subdivision plan in front of us at the time. And we were voting on just a special permit at that time, and the questions of the wall and the other questions, most of which have been answered. But there were other questions associated with the special permit that came up that I remember at that time that also came up and were gonna be answered when the final subdivision was in front of us. That's what this is. And the fact that there is still some question between town and the applicant does tend to make me feel uncomfortable about voting for this right now. I will vote if the applicant pushes for it. Is there anything else from the board before I put it out to the audience?
No,
This is a public hearing.
I agree, we're in a bad spot. And I don't think pushing for a vote is in the best interest of the applicant.
I have said all along, my comfort level with having everything we need in place when we do a certificate of action is my druthers. And I am concerned. I mean, we did have questions back in the cluster zone stage, and we discussed them. And I'm not against this project. I mean, I agree. I think you do good projects, and and I also agree that it's been a long haul. But David is right, this has been two basically separate projects. It was, the cluster zone use permit, special permit, and now this. So I would think if you have the information we need and you can get it by, September 10th, get it in, and then I don't have any qualms if we can satisfy all the concerns.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, but the main concern, and I did not appreciate that this easement issue was kind of a critical piece of the whole piece.
I didn't realize it was, I didn't
Critical
realize that.
part of it. I mean, I get it. It was a
Yeah.
preliminary review, now you do a deeper dive. But I guess the lesson here is if the town owns a piece of land and it's gonna be developed, we gotta make sure that the future applicant, I don't know how many pieces we own, right? It may never happen again, right?
We've had discussions over right-of-ways and easements many times on the board. This is the first one that I can think of where a subdivision has crossed through town property that's gotten the easement. I can't think of another one
Okay,
since I've been on the
well, that
board.
makes me feel better.
But we've talked about easements left and right on almost every other project we've had in front of us. But they've been well noted on the plan, and we've never had any discussion in terms of there being a problem with the easement. We've discussed where it was, but that was about it.
Okay.
Did you want to say something, Scott?
Yeah, it's just, this is the first I've heard about a question about the easement being there. And I've had two surveyors independently in my office. Actually, I had my director up in Haverhill rerun all this. Both of them placed an easement from 333 out and over to here, about 200 feet off of the right-of-way here. The language that describes how it was created is very specific. And this was all done well in advance of this piece being sold to the heirs and then the town taking it from tax purposes. So I think, to the extent, we'll get documents together from our research files, but this is the first I'm hearing about a question about the existings. I do mirror John's. I thought the concern was that others have rights onto it, which they don't. We've done the title through a series of attorneys and surveyors.
Yeah, no,
Right, so maybe there's a miscommunication there. And we're not, and for that reason, you know, we don't feel we're building on town property. We feel like we're exercising our right to improve that right of way that is on the ground to get access out.
right.
Right, so it's, that is in existence over the town piece. So we're not developing the town parcel. I want to make that clear too, because that's not what we're proposing here. We're proposing to exercise rights in an existing right of way that was created in 1954, or around in the early 1950s. The applicant's concern is with, he's gonna have to go out and spend a bunch of money to have a wall designed, because we don't have a contract for it, to purchase the blocks. We're before the Conservation Commission. We have a hearing right after Labor Day with them as well. It would, I think, be helpful, and I'm not promising we can get something in ahead of the next meeting as far as wall design. I don't, as an engineer, feel it's necessary. I feel like that's something we can condition, but yeah, I think it would give some confidence to the applicant to hear, you know, where the board stands on this, provided
Okay.
you receive the information.
I can bring it back to the board unless, I was gonna put it out to the audience first, but I can bring it back to the board after that.
Wall condition, as one member, I'm comfortable with that condition,
Yeah,
that we get it post-approval. I mean, after, you know, that they come forward and say, we're building it, that seems very reasonable to me.
Okay.
The part that I struggle with is this easement, to be honest with you. The priority to me is shifted. I mean, we all agree that the left-hand turn is not a big deal, right?
Right.
The wall's important, but conditioning that seems reasonable. I don't know how we get over the legal issue.
Charles? I know it's a lot.
Pass.
Okay. Nathaniel?
I mean, I think I already said it.
Yeah.
But I didn't mention the left-hand turn they had. That I agree with Peg, that's the homeowners who decide to move in there. That's gonna be their problem. I don't think that there's any reason to deal with that in any way, shape, or form. In terms of the wall, I mean, if the plan that's proposed, and I think I sort of understand it, is that it's approved with a contingency to it, that the plan is then provided afterwards, and if there needs to be some kind of modification done to satisfy the engineering department, I don't see there's any problem with that, like John was just saying. And if that's gonna save the applicant some money, then great, because in the end, if it doesn't change where the board will be, then what's the point of making them spend additional money for no reason? But again, the same thing with the legal issue. We're here representing the town of Danvers, and we're talking about Danvers property. And so if there are legal rights that are in question about Danvers property, then we all should have major concerns. So we need to get it squared away.
Okay.
I also would condition the wall, the design of the wall when they're getting the bricks with whatever they're having to do to get that in. But I think the rub with the wall and the design that engineering is asking for is that that portion goes over the town right-of-way, right? And the town is going to be accepting this road.
I don't believe the
I mean, well, no, I'm
the
sorry.
road does, but not the wall.
Right.
Oh, the wall
But the-
extends out to the road,
Yeah.
out to the east?
But the thing is that the town is gonna be accepting this road, so I can see
Yes.
why they would wanna have something more. I can't remember where that 16-foot retaining wall was, or the 9-foot right now, and whether those roads were taken as public ways, or if they remained private ways.
They're not finished yet, but the walls are all built. One was.
What will the
Whipple
road be? Are you going to go for that to be a public way, for the town to
Hill.
accept it?
Yeah, that's the expectation.
Okay,
Yep, because it was
alright.
fully built out per the regulations otherwise, and
Okay.
and walls are a part of that.
But I can see why the town is asking for that, because they were gonna be accepting that as a public way.
Yep.
But I don't have to have that now. That can be done when they go to get their blocks, and they're designing the wall then and all that.
And
That's
I'll-
fine with me.
For the board's edification too, on sheet 2, because pieces 8.5 by 11 conditions can get lost, the contractors lose them, whatever. On the plans themselves that would get recorded, general note number 7 says retaining walls to be designed and certified by Massachusetts licensed structural engineer, required by the Massachusetts Building Code. So we have a condition in right here that says we gotta do it if it's required. At minimum, we have to pull a building permit for this wall. So it's on the plans.
Unless there's anything else from the board, I'm gonna bring it forward to the audience. All right, does anyone have any comments, questions? Mr. Duggan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matthew Duggan, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Comments specific to 321R Maple Street, the town-owned property. So that property has had a lot of interest in it. And specifically on May 21st of 2018 at town meeting, there was a warrant article number 8, which asked town meeting to authorize the Board of Selectmen to dispose of that property. And there was a considerable discussion during on the town meeting floor for that parcel and how it could be intertwined with the proposed rail trail that it abuts. And conversation and debate took a while. And ultimately, that article failed. The town meeting said they did not want to sell that, and they wanted to keep it for open space. I think many town meeting members were aware of this project, and I think that they thought that by not selling that property, they would prevent the development back there. So I think from comments that I've heard from fellow town meeting members, they were surprised to learn of the easement. The easement should have been flushed out early on. The fact that it's being discussed now is not really a detriment. I think it's part of the process. People citizens that are watching at home, I'm sure they're thinking, well, we should be protecting all town-owned property. When I look at the plans for the access road, it looks like the retaining wall for that section on 321R is at least 9 feet high. That is a blocking of access to that parcel from that road. And it's more than just an easement. When I think of an easement, I think of just maybe a pathway that I can walk across. That elevated road is actually a taking. It's a taking of public property. It's by adverse possession, without any financial compensation to the town. And that is why it's important to get this easement resolved. If it takes a week, a month, a year, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't be voting on this without having that definitively answered. The fact that town council is questioning it, that should be enough for the board to follow through and find out what the actual status of that is. That is, I think, your responsibility for this project, is to get that squared away and not vote on it otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Again, Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Part of what I'm hearing from the board is that this is dragging on too long. I don't think that's a fair argument. If it takes 10 years for this to come to fruition, that's the cost of doing business. It's not approving something last week that shouldn't have been. If it takes, as Matt said, it takes a few weeks, 6 months, or whatever, that's what it takes. And I certainly, one of the questions or answers I gave was, they don't make new land. I don't agree with the town letting town land go. If it's open space, the town can put a tree up there. If that's what it takes, the town should do it. town land is the town lands. It's the residents of the town, our land. That's why this was gonna go to, or did go to town meeting member, and it was turned down, getting rid of that piece of land. I'd like to see it go again, if that's what it takes. If the town has changed their mind and wants to sell the piece of property, fine. But if they don't want to sell a piece of property or whatever, then it's not to be sold. I don't know, don't make an agreement tonight if you're not happy with what you've been given for information. If you need more information, again, if it takes weeks, months, years, if you meet it, that's what it's going to take. Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience, any comments, questions? Oh. Go ahead, sir. Yeah, you can ask.
Jose Velasquez from 317 Maple Street. I fully support this project. I think long-term will benefit the town as well as the residents around the neighborhood.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Richard Ash, 315 Maple Street. I also support this project. I think it'll be good for the area. It'll also improve some of our lots because the way they are right now. I think it'd be a good thing. We should do it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? Go ahead, Aaron.
I apologize, I didn't introduce myself before. Aaron Henry, Town's Director of Land Use and Community Services. I think just with the routing that we do internally, I just wanted to speak to Mr. Colantoni's point. That we got comments back from Town Council on an application in and of itself isn't a big deal. That's not every project goes to Town Council, but a lot do. I think what caught us off guard, even at our level, was that the language of the easement about it being not proven to potentially exist. That said, I don't think we envision that being a hard question to answer. I mean, it either does or it doesn't. We just haven't been furnished the information, so I think it got a little hot and testy there, but I think in and of itself, it shouldn't be a big deal to prove, for the applicant to prove those rights. Ms. McCann intimated at the last meeting that she had that information and would be providing it, just didn't come in. I think we're still within the action deadline, the constructive approval date.
Yeah.
So in theory, I think we've heard a lot from the board about what potential conditions would exist. So I think we could use those 2 weeks. I'm not sure it's 2 weeks, it might be 3, because this is a fifth week. But regardless, at the time between this meeting and next, we could work on a draft decision such that the applicant uses those 2 weeks to furnish that information to Town Council's satisfaction, which shouldn't be that hard to do. We come back with a draft decision for the board to contemplate at its next meeting, and we're still in an action deadline, and these other conditions get a chance to get drafted, and the board would comment on those to us at that time.
Just for what it's worth, I think, thanks Aaron for bringing us home, just not to lose focus of it though too. It's not necessarily merely a case of slapping down a piece of paper saying, yes, the easement does in fact exist. The town may also have, that's okay, the town may also have rights in that way that we do want to clarify, so just for what it's worth.
Okay. So I'm going to bring it back to the board for a moment. So what we have in front of us now is that the applicant's willing to take a condition on the wall. And I'm hearing from most of the board that they're comfortable with that, and that when it's built, that if it doesn't meet the standards, that it would come back in front of us. The easement question should be easily answered, and we should be able to have a draft all set for next meeting, as long as the applicant can bring that forward to us, which shouldn't be that hard to do. I don't have any other questions outside of those two. They answered my question about the water to my comfort level on the waiver for the length of the road, so I have no issues with that. Is there anything else that the board had questions about, before I present to the applicant what we want to.
What you said sounds fine to me. I have no issues other than that easement, and I think if they obviously have the information, they said, then it could just be brought forward, and as long as it satisfies staff and council, it's fine with me. And I do think that condition is a way to go regarding the wall.
Okay.
No, I feel the same way. Obviously, if that easement was written 50-plus years ago and it needs to be modernized, then I get that viewpoint as well. So, but I think that issue's got to get resolved. It is town-owned land, and we understand, you know, what our responsibilities are. So I'd like to have that understood. I mean,
Okay. Charlie?
I'm in agreement.
Okay. Nathaniel?
Well, there was something that, when Mr. Bradstreet and Mr. Duggan spoke, that refreshed my memory about, I don't know if it was the last meeting or one of the times before, but I had raised an issue with respect to the building of that road over that parcel of land owned by Danvers, because it would bisect it and leave a parcel, a small parcel, but a parcel owned by the town, really kind of like an island unto itself, which I don't believe was accessible by 62. It's just like, it would just sit there and it would be unusable, in effect. There was also discussion, I believe.
Actually, I think it does go all the way up to 62. Does it? Is the house there?
It would just be like an island. So that still is unresolved in my mind, in terms of why the town is agreeing to that without requiring maybe they give that up in exchange for something else nearby. And we talked about an access to the rail trail, and that was not discussed tonight. And so, and I think I raised it, that it would seem that the right-of-way where the town-owned property would be a perfect access point. However, where there's a 9-foot wall on that portion, that presents like a it's literally a wall. So if somebody's walking on the rail trail and decides to veer onto town land and wants to use the land for their recreation, they run into a wall.
I could be mistaken on this, but I don't believe that there's actually access to the rail trail from that lot. Isn't there a river or something over there?
The parcel runs directly into it, but it's wet, which is.
It's a standing body of water that you'd have to cross over 200 feet to get to the rail trail. So there is no physical connection from here to here. This is standing water in the wetland. There's a pond here in this area. And then this comes down and connects to Beaverbrook.
Right.
So there is no physical connection. And no, Sam, of course, sounds we're gonna have the information from council on the rights to use that right away for access to the lots here.
So Scott, when we went out for that walk and we jumped over to where were we?
We were way up over here where it's just a stream crossing.
Okay.
That was way back up in here.
So that was the town.
And actually, we went out and surveyed it at this time. That's why there's a couple of contour lines right here.
Okay.
This is up over here. That's that light blue. That's the town piece.
Okay.
And it doesn't have access frontage on Route 62 either, because the house lot's still there that the town's not on.
And since we're not doing, or you're not doing, the cluster development, there's no more public access that would be contemplated up where we had crossed over.
Correct. Although there is an easement that's reserved by the town for wall maintenance that comes down along the front of this lot to get to that area, so that you could come around the wall and come back theoretically. Although there's nothing, this is all, standing water.
What about the piece on the 62 side?
You
Right
can
here?
you can get access right down here.
Right, but it's landlocked because it's behind a house, right? And you're gonna
Yes.
have the wall. So my question is, does it get maintained? Does it get cut? Who takes care of it? Is it just
It's-
gonna look like just woodland?
It's a wooded piece.
Okay.
It's a wooded parcel, so it's woodland.
Okay.
And it would remain, if you call to, as you come around this bend here,
Mhm.
and you walk up this area, there's kind of the shape of the land juts out.
Mhm.
So you really, And it's a pretty good grade change going from 92 down to 62. It's 30 feet here. There's kind of this ridge that comes down along this. You kind of come around it, and that's where you start. So you can't even see this house from here. Because this comes up 30 feet.
I do remember the discussion on town meeting floor about, about the parcel of land, and there were a lot of different things that came up about its use, where it could be used, you know, its access to the rail trail, and no one actually gave any definitive use of that particular part of land. But I think it also got mixed in with other areas that were unbuilded, that wasn't built at that point in time. But that was town meeting floor as opposed to where we're seeing a subdivision plan right now. That's a right of way, that's not giving the land over to the applicant. That's a use just to cross through.
No, I understand that, but when they have a physical obstacle that's 9 feet high, I understand where Mr. Duggan was calling it a taking. I don't think legally it's a taking, but in effect, it becomes something that's unusable because it's not just something that's being traversed where people using the town land, even though it may be landlocked, or water covered, they can't continuously walk from point A to point B because there's a 9-foot wall in front of them.
True.
So,
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question?
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I can direct my team in the right direction when we leave tonight. So through the chair, a question for David and Aaron. My team is going to zoom in on the proof of the right-of-way through the town property. The wall situation seems like would be a condition, which is fine by us. But is there any other things that we should zoom in on to help the board at the next meeting?
I believe all my questions have answered. Anybody else on the board before I give it to staff?
All my questions except for those?
Those are the only two I had.
Satisfied.
Anything else, David, that, I don't think there was anything else that we,
There's nothing else, just furnish us the easements and the deeds showing access and who has rights.
okay.
Okay, you see, Mr. Chair, he says easements. Again, I want to be very specific. We're talking about the town piece of property that you need proof for town council that there's a legal easement right-of-way through that property on where we're placing our road. That's what we're going to concentrate on. That's what you need. Is that correct?
Yes. We're not looking for any other easement off the property to,
None of the other private
we weren't,
lots?
we
not at
weren't
the end of
talking
the
about
road?
any of that, no.
Okay, thank you.
No,
Thank you.
no, this wasn't even a discussion about right-of-way or easements for water at that point in time on the extension. We brought that up earlier.
All right.
But that's not something that we're looking for. It's just for the road work itself. That crosses the town property.
Perfect.
Okay?
Just want to make sure we get what you want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hearing that, it looks like we're all set. We've got everything we need, so we're looking for a continuance to
The 10th.
the 10th. And it looks like is the action date okay?
Yep.
Okay.
I move that we continue Beaverbrook Woods to September 10.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We'll see you in 2 or 3 weeks,
Thanks.
whenever, however long it is.
Yep.
Have a nice long weekend. I'll give 2 minutes to let the
I get these late.
room clear. We're gonna take a short break for right now. We'll let we'll let the board stretch its legs.
We'll let the old lady move.
The whole board.
Corinthian leather chairs don't help.
not on the
public
agenda.
access.
Minutes aren't on the agenda?
Right, but I thought maybe because
Doesn't matter.
as the
That's okay.
laid out as a
You don't have to send it to 'em
conventional
next time.
plan, some of the lower properties might be too
Oh, well-
low in the wetlands and make those not worth
We
it.
have to, we kinda have to have it on the agenda, don't we?
Next time.
Yeah,
Let's put it
okay.
on the agenda.
Certain waivers too, and we said,
So when did it get approved though that this road was gonna be adopted by
Glad
the
that I
town?
did
I thought that
Now
was
I completely
like
don't
neg-
remember, but I can do it.
I'll do it.
well,
Oh,
the
tying it
theory,
into
build a road
the
to town
overall-
spec,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, in a subdivision, you have the right to
Better than I
petition to
think.
the town to take over.
But
And
I'll-
most people want.
I'm about to
because
throw it
they
over
get
to you anyway, so
town
you can
services.
say anything you
Right,
want.
but I thought we
All
had
right.
concluded
Ready
that
to
that
go?
wasn't gonna happen.
All right, we're back in action
Concluded that
here.
it would happen.
Would you, the guy?
Does he know?
I told them, yep.
Okay. So we're gonna proceed. We have one item left on the agenda. We're going to other matters, and it's for staff briefing, and I'm gonna give it to David.
So up next, we have Mr. Henry, the Director of Land Use and Community Services, and myself, who are gonna do a brief presentation on, as you can see from the screen, current trends in demographic development in Danvers. Part of the reason for this was to kind of tie everything in with the 40R, a little bit of why that's being tackled now and the way it's being tackled, and really to bring it back to change in the community that's happening one way or the other, regardless of how much we rezone or what we end up doing. So hopefully this ties into the zoning conversation where what we're trying to do is attempt to manage growth a little bit, given that all these changes are occurring across the country and in the Commonwealth, no matter what we do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you, David. And I think, again, I think I've gotten, just as being a resident and on staff, you do kind of get that prompt about what we're trying to do downtown, some of the work what we've done with I-1, kind of what's the plan with that? And I think what this presentation is trying to do is provide a little bit of context to that. People will say, oh, this change is largely driven by new development, when in fact, at least in this part of the country, that is not what's really driving change in our communities. And we'll talk about that briefly in other parts of the presentation about how other parts of the country are growing, and that might be a more valid statement. But in this area, we wanted to kind of talk about what's going on and where we think we might be going with these changes, like how these changes fit into a bigger puzzle. So, largely speaking, there's about 4 big categories of things that change a community. Your natural change, your births and your deaths, your housing unit supply, usually that's a positive number, usually that's something that's growing, but not always. There are parts of the country right now that are shrinking. There's changes within your current population. That given day, we're all getting a little bit older and people are moving on and evolving, so that, yeah. You're looking great. I'm losing it. So there's the changes that are occurring within the community, within the population at any given time. And then what we're seeing in this area, in the Boston suburbs especially, is that most of that change is really occurring because your housing stock is flipping over itself, and that's just changing out large portions of the community at one time. I would say, I should have said this on the prior slide, this is probably about the 4th iteration of this presentation that David and I have given over the last 6 months. We've spoken to Rotary, we've spoken to the Board of Selectmen, we've been kind of doing a dog and pony show, so some people may recognize these slides. We're hopefully getting it a little bit better every time, so it's not exactly the same as it always is, but same theme. So to our point, that the largest single factor in Danvers for pushing demographic change is probably happening within the existing housing stock that's already been built. We have a little over 11,000 housing units here in town. We're not really adding much. Every year, we're selling, somewhere around 450 plus or minus units a year. Those could be single families. These are all sales. The 10-year average is a little lower than the 5-year average, as you can see. The recession did hit Danvers marketplace. You can see the recession in the 90s as well. So we're definitely have an elastic market based on the broader economy, but generally speaking, our average is around between 400 and 500 sales a year. This chart kind of tries to show that in a different way. What does it mean for you when you're out and about in the community, and who you bump into and how long have they lived here? There's a lot going on here, but I'll try to describe what this is saying is that in 2010, about 20% of your population had lived here before 1979. But by 2017, that number had slid to 16%. So this is in 2010. And by 2017, that number had slid. And what you'll see as you move over to the right, so the newer buckets are to the right. Today, we have about 17% of the community. So what is that, about 3,200 households here in town have moved here in the last 10 years.
I just think a key takeaway, Aaron and I discussed this a little bit earlier, to keep in mind about this chart, you can never go backwards. So no one can ever go back in time and move in prior to 1979. So that end of the chart kind of is always shrinking, while this end is always growing as new people come into the market.
And so you'll notice to that point, these bars here, almost getting to 40%, a little over 40% of the community at that point had moved into Danvers in that decade, in the 2000s. But it's already decayed down to a third of the community. It will never be higher. The question we don't know, because we don't have this statistic over time, is how sticky will this be in this new economy? So we know, hopefully it's going to always kind of have this similar profile to it, but that's not a guarantee. So again, we see a lot of change happening. And then to put it on a map, this is, I think this is census blocks.
Yeah.
Census blocks, so these are I think we have about 3 tracts in town. This is broken up.
That's interesting.
I think this one's obvious that this is probably, since 2010, this might be Avalon coming online. This might be one of the larger apartment developments on Route 1 that came online. You'll see some neighborhoods are pretty quiet. This is Folly Hill. It's been pretty stable. This neighborhood's been very stable. That's the mall. There's not a lot of housing units in that block group, so that's probably artificially low. But you'll see, and I also liked it because you're seeing some of the neighboring census blocks around us. We're by no means experiencing a unique phenomenon. There's a huge amount of housing turnover happening in eastern Massachusetts right now. There's a lack of supply, and as such, the marketplace is really churning. I've been saying red hot. It's probably considered white hot. I mean, it's just residential. We can't satiate the demand right now as a region. So switching that up and actually now looking at how the population itself is changing between 2013 and today, the latest estimate coming out in 2017. The next several slides I'm going to have to fly over, otherwise we'll be here all night long. But the key to takeaways to look for are, there's a statistic with an up arrow or a down arrow. If the arrow, and that just tells you if the trend is going up or the trend is going down. If the arrow is solid, it means we have a statistical significant change occurring. So something might go up by 5%, and that sounds like a lot, but if it's not statistically, it means more if it's statistically significant change, that it's really something else is happening here other than chance. And I would also say, and I'll use this first one, when we get to the ones that have percentage, it's not saying that we've had a 70% reduction. It's the estimate for home ownership in Danvers right now is 70%, but that 70% is a lower number than where it was in 2013. So on this slide, there's a lot there. We can share this with anybody who has an interest, because you might want to do a deep dive and we can scare you with all kinds of crazy statistics. I think the takeaway here would be the 2 cells in the upper right-hand corner, where we see the population of Danvers is increasingly at a statistically significant rate, but the number of households is only increasing. And what we think is happening here, and this is a theme that we'll probably hear throughout the process, and does, for me, tie back into the larger work that the planning board's trying to do, is the empty nesters are selling, and they're backfilled by a household with 4 people or 5 people, or whatever the case may be. So while we're not really growing the number of units for households to occupy, the occupancy characteristic of the household itself is changing every time one of those sales occurs. We're flipping over units.
Aaron, I don't know, so the difference between the population and the household, that 17,000,
No, I guess what it's trying to show is that the increase, now that we're at 27,000, where we were in 2013, the change between where we were and where we are in terms of total population is statistically significant. We
Yeah.
are moving ahead, we are growing faster than the state and the nation.
okay,
However, when it comes to the housing unit, the number of households, it's not keeping pace. So the only explanation is the households are getting bigger, they're not.
okay, so there's more people in the houses,
Yeah.
okay, I get what you're saying, okay.
And that goes back to the housing turnover,
Yep.
which is, that
Okay.
change is being driven by,
Okay.
real estate, not necessarily by changes to the built environment. And there's some other stats there, and again,
Aaron, real quick, the
Yep.
open arrows mean it's not statistically.
Correct.
And the
So it's a
full arrows
trend,
mean
and it's something, again, that's
above or
something.
either higher or lower than the 5%, whatever, you know, to make it statistically relevant.
Right, yep. So, age, not a surprise here that we're older than the state and nation as a whole. We're still younger than the state of Maine, which is the oldest in the nation at 46 years old, but we are certainly a mature community, not surprising. I think the takeaway here is, again, just the breakdown of the buckets. There are more buckets than we're showing. These are just the ones that I thought where we're either bucking a trend or going with a trend that you might find of interest. And again, households with someone in it 65 or older going up, not a surprise, given the baby boomers and the silver tsunami that we hear a lot about. Income, interesting here. Our income numbers are going down where the state and nation are going up. David and I talked about this just again today to try to figure out why this might be. Starting to maybe make a little bit more sense, and I think you have to kind of put this as a part of an analysis across a lot of statistics. We think this is probably rooted in, again, the change in households coming in. There's reason to believe the households coming in are of higher income than the folks that are here today, and that their needs are a little bit different, and that's kind of dragging down. Plus, we have the seniors. We have more seniors, more kids in that number, averaging out, so that'll also bring it down. So there's a couple of factors going on in this statistic. Here's another one that's kind of funky, top right corner here. Like the rest of the nation, we're seeing a overall decline in school enrollment. But remember, before anybody freaks out and says, but Danvers enrollment is going up, I completely understand that. This is all students in Danvers enrolled in schools. What's happening in grades 1 through 8 is that is increasing, and that's more consistent with data that we're seeing at the local level. Most of those kids in grades 1 through 8 are probably in our public school system. But again, so there's kind of a converse relationship there. Further down, again, how did we manage to increase the number of people with advanced degrees within 5 years to a statistically significant number? That has to be coming through the turnover in the housing stock, because you can't earn a degree in the time of the survey. So it has to be people coming in. And again, I think that's indicative to some of these broader economic changes that we see coming with the housing turnover. When it comes to race and ethnicity, where Danvers has never been more diverse than it is today. As you can see, we're still a pretty homogeneous community.
More diverse than we have been.
Yes,
but,
absolutely,
yeah.
yes.
That's a better one.
Enough said, I think that speaks for itself. A quick snapshot on the housing stock. Again, as we talked about, we have a little over 11,000 household units, meaning the families that comprise our community, and we have a little over 11,000 housing units in the community. We're losing, and again, this is an excerpt of a much bigger data set. Interesting that what we see is structures built between 70 and 79. This community experienced its post-war boom quite a bit later, in the late 60s, early 70s. I'm thinking of neighborhoods like Woodhaven that are experiencing a lot of extensive renovation. And what you see is we're losing that housing stock in a significant manner, similar to the post-war period, which is less surprising and a little bit more typical of a suburban community in eastern Massachusetts to be experiencing. But again, you do see that's also a statistically significant number. The bottom two rows point to that. However, what's happening is we're adding bedrooms to houses, and we're actually losing 2-bedroom houses. So we're building, the houses that are replacing the structures from the 70s and the 40s are bigger and have more bedrooms. And again, I will point to that bottom slide as the demographic that we're hearing from, the Danvers demographic that wants to see something else built in town, like we're trying to do downtown, is I want to downsize, I need to get out of something else, yet we're removing them from the existing housing stock. So somehow we have to find a way to put those back in the inventory. Yes, Bill?
Where would the reuse of larger homes into 4 condo units fall on that? Where we've had redevelopment
Yep.
of the same site, where would that fall on that? Would it be like
It depends. There are times when the assessor's office will, the modifications to the structure are so extensive that it'll kind of actually update the date of the structure.
Okay.
But in this particular case, I think that that's like Mr. Colantoni's project on Cherry Street, you know, a large single family
Yeah.
or a large multifamily, and then turning that into 5 or 6. My guess is that does not get caught in the structure is not lost. But the other attributes of the housing unit in there would have been obliterated. So that may have been a 2-unit, 4-bedroom, apartment building that was then turned into 4 2-bedroom units. So you would see the statistic for the number of bedrooms fall, although number of housing units would have gone up, but the structure lost wouldn't have been reported.
Also, just a note on those, they squeeze a lot of space in those structures. They don't always come out to be 2 bedrooms, those units. They can be higher.
Yep. Yep. But again, I think what we're hearing is that, you know, I think with the downtown zoning project, I think what we keep hearing, what we need is smaller units that can be more appropriate for younger starter households or the empty nesters, and yet we're actually losing those. We're not even holding on to what we have. Whoops. Flew through. So unemployment is very good in Danvers. We are even lower than the state. So that's, again, I think that's a testament to our location. We're close to everything, and that's a good thing, and I think that has a huge competitive advantage over our neighbors. Interestingly here, we are seeing drive times going up, which is consistent with the congestion in the eastern Massachusetts area. Although again, our mode split, how we're getting around the region hasn't really changed, and we're still kind of an auto-centric community, which makes sense. We're connected to all the major surface roads in the area. Here you see parents in workforce. This has to do with who's working at home. Most households with children, 80% of households with children have both parents working, which again is not a huge surprise. Here, what do Danvers residents do? We're seeing a decline in sales and office jobs and an increase in management, business, and science. That's probably a good thing in the sense of personal income. I think that seems to be a positive trend. What industries are they working in? Again, it's kind of interesting that we're seeing the continued decline in manufacturing, an increase in education and healthcare, increases in retail. That's kind of an interesting one. That doesn't mean that there's more jobs at the Liberty Tree Mall today than there were 5 years ago. That means more Danvers residents are reporting that their occupation is in retail. And we also see an increase in professional, scientific, and management fields. That makes some sense in that you have the cluster at Cherry Hill, cluster at Industrial Ave, a lot of medical device manufacturing and medical related issues. And you also have Leahy and Partners Healthcare in town. So again, it makes sense that we're seeing an increase in education and healthcare sector as well. So I'm kind of been going backwards along those factors that change a community, kind of up to the hopefully we're not gonna do a slide on births and deaths, so this is the last group. This is on actual development, how are we changing the built environment? And I think it's important to talk about how this looks nationally right now. Over the time period, over the year of basically July 1, 2017 to July 18, you'll see that New England is in a pale blue color, meaning we just kind of grew a little bit. When you'll see areas in the southeast and southwest that are much hotter than us. See some deep reds as well. Upstate Maine, where I don't come from upstate Maine. My parents got smart and got out of there before that happened. But you know, you do have dying counties. I didn't hear that, and that's probably for the best. But so nationally, the growth is kind of weak in our region. Within the region itself, Boston area is, again, it's a white hot region. It's kind of this dichotomy of we're a global hotspot right now. But within the metro area itself, we're pretty weak. We need to grow more. We're adding far more jobs than housing units.
Aaron?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any, I'm sure that this is probably way out there, but do we have any statistics with you saying that we're adding more jobs than housing of the decreasing unemployment rate corresponding with people who have more than one job?
We have not come across that one. I think we've come across bits and pieces of that one.
Most of what we were looking at, the census reports as full-time employment, so whatever you respond as full-time, so they really, unfortunately, they don't give you the opportunity to check that box to answer that question. And we could try to find that from other data sources. I don't think we definitely don't have it in this slideshow.
I think just to make sure I'm understanding, the question might be despite what these things say, is there a second job kind of behind there that this might not be getting at?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can look into that. That's a great point. No, it'd be interesting. There's some stuff in here like about both parents working. You can tell the Census Bureau is trying to scratch at that, something like that too, trying to get to that next level. And it doesn't break out full-time employment versus whatever employment. So I could be on Social Security and work at Walmart, and as far as the survey is concerned, I work in retail, and I make whatever I make. So there are some limitations, but that's a great question. We'll look into that. So talking about kind of the tepid growth that we see in New England, what we're looking at in Danvers, the projection here is to grow by about 100 persons per year between 2020 and 2030. And I say this is population change, not necessarily unit count. Again, our unit occupancy is probably around 3 per unit typically. So again, we're talking about maybe 33 to, well, I'm not good at math on the fly, but you know, so that's saying that there'd be some probably new household growth, but mostly this is a population change, and it's pretty similar in the region. Again, New England and this area is not growing out of control. What does it all mean? Sorry, I found that one, I liked it. So again, to tie this back into what are we trying to do, even like I'll go, and I was on the board for a long time, so I think I can say this with some comfort. You know, kind of what was the animus behind even the I-1 stuff? Like, what are we trying to do with all of this? And I think what we're offering folks to think about is basically recalibrating this growth going forward to try to better serve our community goals. Like right now, I would argue your zoning is calibrated to meet regional needs. So the region needs more single-family housing units. And as long as we continue to produce those, they will continue to be bought. But through the process, the planning processes that we've engaged in over the last few years, we're not hearing that from our residents. We're hearing that I want to downsize, you know, I'm thinking of Diane Langley, you know, I want to downsize from my beautiful home on Cabot and come downtown and be able to be more active and vibrant in a more walkable scenario. The millennials that want to move back to home after a couple years of college or get out of your basement are looking for something else. They're not ready to afford the single-family detached home. And again, I think for context, we have 11,000 housing units here in town. 10,000 of them are single-family detached dwellings. We have 1,000 everything else, and half of those are on Route 1 in one development. So there's not a lot of other out there. So again, I think we want to recalibrate that, try to hit that marketplace, be a little bit more self-serving. That'll also have environmental impacts in that I think where we've already got built environment and the impacts from development, we can kind of preserve the lands that are a little further out. And I think through this recalibration, we can better address some of the affordability issues that we hear about. And that doesn't just mean the SHI stuff that goes on the list, but also trying to devise a strategy to get just what something might call affordable or attainable with a capital A, lowercase a. So here's the map today. This is the zoning map of the town today, and these circles represent where we're likely to see future development. And again, David and I have done some rudimentary number crunching. We will continue to fine tune this. 650-ish properties that seem to have some, I'm sorry, not 650 properties that yield about 650 units still to come. The circles represent where generally those units are most likely to be seen. You could throw a dart at this map and probably find something that could be produce another unit. But generally speaking, we're going to see those next 650 single-family homes developed out in R3 somewhere. And so again, those are more infrastructure intensive, generally at this point have greater environmental impacts because those lands have been passed over for generations because they weren't necessarily the prime buildable lands that were taken advantage of in the post-war era. So we're seeing more problematic properties in these areas. So again, I think we have a chance to rethink that a little bit, focus it downtown where we have existing infrastructure, there's a lot less impacts going on. There's another concept I threw up here on the map, if you look real quick. When I flip between the two, you're gonna see a lot more green on the second one. And that's a concept that we're also trying to work on, which is in a way of trying to balance that. The current zoning map today in this town, not a single square foot of open space. Everything should be something. Most of it will be single-family detached. Some of it will be other things, commercial, industrial, manufacturing, but there will be no open space. This map shows you, in essence, what today is owned by federal, state, local government, including some other related civic institutions. And again, that's a conversation we can have at another time, but wanted to show you again that there's this, we have to start thinking about what is really going on the ground. These are properties that are off the map for all intents and purposes, except for the zoning map, which is perhaps, one of the most important images that a community portrays to the marketplace about what it wants for its community's future. So I do think we need to have a further conversation about that. But again, when you put all those on the board, I think you start to see a kind of a more complete picture and hopefully a little bit of context, I think, to what, and again, I'm not trying to make a rationale in retrospect for you on what we're doing, but I think this is kind of how things fit into the broader planning work plan that we're working on and how downtown fits into that.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's anything that to make comments on,
I
but
should clap, but.
Nope.
It'd be great if we could get that deck slide, if you
Yep.
can forward
We
it
can
up.
send
Yeah,
it to
yeah, we'll
everybody for
share
sure.
that.
Aaron, did you put that together?
David and I have been.
That must have taken forever. Nice job.
Thank you.
It is a nice job.
We've been here for about a year, so.
And I think, again, broadly speaking, obviously, we hope downtown continues on its trajectory and things go well. And then on the backside of that, we'd like to talk to you more about kind of what's next. And David and I kind of thinking that we kind of would like to continue to have a conversation kind of at a high level like this with the community in a general sense, just because it's been, we've done planning in bits and pieces over the years, and we've done a lot of planning. This town deserves a lot of credit for the number planning exercises it goes through. But we haven't really had a kind of a sit down and talk about like the big strategy of what we're trying to do, probably since the planning board kind of undertook the I-1 initiative, and that came out of a 2004 study.
4 or 5.
Yeah, the Dufresne-Henry,
Mhm.
yeah. So I think I think if we can get through this, I think it's kind of a major bookend, even though it's not the end of all of the I-1 areas that the planning board has been working on for over a decade. I think we would have reached a major milestone in that initiative, and that would maybe this time next year, we can talk a little bit more about kind of what else is going on. There's a lot of attention that should be probably given to the mall area, Endicott Street. There's a lot of changes going on out there. Partners is obviously invested in Sylvania's former site, and there's some changes probably coming to that site going forward. 114 has evolved immensely with the car dealerships. Route 1 is still sitting there with a lot of untapped potential. So again, I think timing is right if we can kind of get through this, and we thought this presentation might kind of help give you guys a little bit more context and depth to what we're up to.
Yeah. I think going back to Dufresne-Henry with the I-1, I think even in Dufresne-Henry, we're basically through what we had planned to do in that report. There are a couple of smaller I-1 areas. I think there's one on North Street, there's one up by Connor's Farm.
Yep.
I think Dufresne-Henry probably, I think the recommendation may have been, if not, leave it alone, just meld it into the zoning that was around it. I can't think of any others other than the one that we've actually addressed. So other than the downtown High Street area, I think we fulfilled our objective with Dufresne-Henry upon completion of that.
I don't have anything else.
No, my only other comment, I think you kind of touched on it, Aaron, is, we're seeing dramatic changes in retail. And the regional mall is going away, right? So those communities that get out in front of that,
Yep.
and what do they want to do for reuses, you're seeing it, left and right, so.
We've met on that front, we've met with representatives of Simon Malls. We're meeting with the planning staff in Peabody last week on a different matter, but the malls came up there. So again, it's definitely something that we're trying to make sure that they know that, we're not gonna say yes to everything, but we wanna make sure they know how to reach us and what their needs may be going forward. Because again, in the planning, there's a term of art in the planning world, sometimes those are referred to as gray fields. So brown fields are, shut down, contaminated sites that clearly have negative, reuse options. Gray fields are kind of like, it's not quite that bad, but it can become an eyesore, and not that mall is, but that's the kind of, we need to make sure that we're growing it and cultivating that relationship in order to keep it vibrant.
Or even a reuse, there's beautiful residential opportunities if they're done right? So you already have a condominium project leading into the mall.
Yep.
So the communities that are trying to make that shift.
Yep. And again, we have the location, the competitive advantage that we have given our location is,
It's huge.
yeah.
Where's the church going in the mall? Is it going in the mall, or is it's going actually physically inside the mall?
Yes.
And that's right across from the movie theater? Is that Netcast? Is that what it's called?
I don't know the name.
Yeah, I can't remember, I apologize, I can't remember exactly where the opening is going to be inside.
Because there's a
the
big
mall.
sign that says netcast.com across from the Liberty Tree.
I believe it's near the Panera.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
further
I thought it
down?
was I thought it was down further, but,
Okay. I was just curious because I read about it in the paper. That's huge,
yep,
huge.
yep. So, thank you, appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
and we'll get this out to you if
Yes.
sounded like that was some interest.
All right, anything else from staff?
That's it.
Anybody have anything for staff?
Just wanted to know, any update on the downtown? What's happening with that study?
We met with Mr. Grovitz last week, who's continuing his work to refine based on comments we heard from the last public meetings. he did send us a updated draft. I can get that out to you all. That being said, I should also send out the timeline for the remainder of the year. There's a couple public meetings. One thing you should know about, looks like this fall town meeting is actually going to be a February town meeting.
Okay.
So I'll get you the revised timeline and the new draft.
Okay, good.
Who ultimately votes on changing?
All right, unless there's anything else, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.